Okay, as for me, I've met some of you, but not many of you. I'm not very important. There's lots of people here who know a lot more than I do. I've been doing this for about 15 years in IT, but only about 5 with SQL Server. And I worked my way up from building PCs to selling them to help desk to being a DBA. And I recently got my MCSA. I worked for On-Call DBA, who bought all the pizza. And I really hate when I encounter an issue and Google like an error code and nothing comes up. So whenever I have a big problem, I usually write a blog post on my blog, Zen Interactions, and the search for business intelligence. Automation is like a really big topic. There's always people who are writing about it, usually from a DevOps context. DevOps likes automating continuous integration and builds and deployments and things. And there's a big conflict between how much do I automate and is this going to risk my job? And I really don't care because I just hate rote tasks. And if I can do away with them, then I don't really care about anything else. But as these comics often show, there's a real return on automating anything. You work out how long you take to do a task over and over, and how often you do it, and it quickly adds up into a massive black hole of time wasted. And on top of that, after you automate something, it's like all code. It's not something that you just write and then forget about. It takes a certain amount of maintenance and time improving the scripts and adding things to it. And yeah. But the thing is, every hour that you invest into this makes the script better. And then when you run the script every day, 5 times a day for the rest of the year, you're getting an investment out of that hour that you put in before. It just adds up over and over and over. If you were to do this task every single time by yourself, then you've got risks of making a mistake. You don't really improve as readily as you do with something that's written down. And some of you probably didn't see this original page, which Verizon took off, but it's about Bob. You may have seen the other headlines where Bob outsourced his job to China and gave a whole bunch of people his VPN passwords and sat there writing reports at the end of each day and getting fabulous performance reviews. And he did this for years and years and years, not really doing any work, so he could watch cat videos, which is something we can all aspire to. I particularly like this one because it points out the hypocrisy that it's okay for a business to outsource something, but not for an employee to outsource something. But we probably won't take things to this degree, but everyone wants to automate something, and Bob sounds pretty good. So this automation isn't really new. I mean, with MS-DOS1, you could do batch files. And then we had VBScript, 1996. I never actually used VBScript for anything. And then PowerShell has been around since 2006, and it's pretty amazing. It's got its own development studio, basically, with syntax highlighting, line-by-line debugging. It's fantastic, and it's not going away. And you have to use it for all your Exchange administration now and a whole bunch of other stuff. So you should probably get with the program and learn it. There's been a couple major versions of it. You can live with version 2, and I live with version 2 now, but you can upgrade to version 3, which has like a whole bunch of extra commandlets and functionality, and that would probably be the preferred one to start with if you can install it. And version 4 just came out for automating deployments of virtual machines and stuff called desired state configuration. I won't be going into any of that, but you have to be really careful. You can't just throw this onto a server, because version 3 in particular had problems with Exchange and SCOM, and it could break a lot of things. They have, like, on the release notes page, it says, don't install it on this kind of server, don't install it on this server. And version 4 has the same thing, although they release service packs to address that. But for now, just kind of keep it in your development thing, and if you put it on a server, you should test it first. Okay, so for starters, when you install it, you'll get this PowerShell ISE, which is the integrated development environment. It installs 2 sets of icons into your start menu. One's just PowerShell, which is like an old DOS command line style, But PowerShell ISE is the one that you should always open because you've got the script editing window and a whole bunch of extra functionality. And there's versions for x86 and x64. The x86 one is usually the one you want to start if you're going to do any ODBC stuff, because the x64 one doesn't play very well with the drivers. And the first thing you would do after you install is run update help. You run it as administrator, you type in update help, and it downloads the help from the internet, because version 3 onwards don't come bundled with any help, and the help is super important to everything you do. And the third thing, and I'll show you all of this actually in scripts, is you set strict mode version latest. PowerShell, when it starts up, you could type any kind of variable name that you want and reference it, and it won't really care. But if you use set strict mode latest, it does checking to see whether you've declared that variable first or assigned it a value before you start messing around with it. And that will save you hours and hours of time trying to find some weird bug about why something doesn't work. So these are some of the basics that we're going to start with. And there's really a whole lot of basics to go over, but I'm going to try to chunk it down. And I think you should understand most of it in the beginning. And as we get to the end, you probably won't understand it, but you'll just see this is what it can do, and maybe do some investigation on your own. So lots and lots of demos. So I've got these set up on my thing. If I was doing this for the first time, I'd update the help first, but I've already got that. So let's get started. What you'll find is most of the commands have a two-part syntax where it's a verb and then a noun, get-help. You can see a list of verbs to start with: block, grant, disconnect, merge, mount, convert. All of these are the starting words of commands that you can run. And you could see a list of commands you want to run with a get-command. And you can see they all start here with these various verbs, and they have various nouns. So I'm just going to create a temporary file to have some text in it. The command's just send content path. You could run this command without having path and value written in there. So I'll just take that out. When you run commands, sometimes the position of the variables, of the parameters are predetermined, so it knows the first thing you pass in is going to be the file name, and the other one's going to be the text that you want to set in it. I'll just make sure I'm in the right directory. Okay, so that set content was one, just to write a string out to a file, and it would override it. But say you wanted to know what other content commands there were. We've got a list here. You just type get help star content, and you see you've got add, clear, set, get. But you can still do old DOS commands. They mostly work. They're called aliases. So type is actually get content. Dir is get child item. Copy is copy item. Del remove item. Move item. So they still work, but the parameters that you put on the end may not necessarily work. Oh, I don't know why. So for example, that would work in my CMD, but it doesn't work here. It wants the real parameters, the PowerShell parameters. Okay, it's searching through, and I'll show you how to deal with those error messages about access later. So dir, cd, all of that, these are aliases for the real thing, and you can see all the PowerShell aliases with get alias. And you can most PowerShell, these queries accept some kind of wildcard, so you can have a look. Okay.
With the set content, when you took the others, is that sort of like using positional association and
Yep.
name association parameters?
Yep. So here, just to show that the positional parameters, I can do a help that's got a special ending, show window. I just learned this a few days ago from Dennis, actually, where it shows you all of the parameters it will take in a nice window here. And if I was to go down to go down the list, the path here has a position of 1, and the content thing would be a bit higher than that. So you can always investigate any commands that you see on the system. People wrote some parts of that, but other parts of it PowerShell stripped out itself, so it knows what parameters are the default, and you could type help for anything, and if it has a default parameter, like a positional parameter, then help would show it. Okay, so there's more basics here. There's comments that you've seen so far, which is just a pound. You've got these brackets and pounds for block comments. This is just a string, just in quotes. And this is setting a variable. Variables have a $sign before it. And you can stick a variable inside a string and it inserts the contents of it. But we can also use single quotes, and in those cases it doesn't do any evaluation on the variables that it's putting in, so you have a choice. Or you can use backticks to say don't evaluate this thing. So these two will be similar, except you can see the backtick in this one because it doesn't even evaluate that. You could use backticks to spread commands over one line, and you'll see people do that a lot, and other people hate it because it's hard to spot. These here is a special kind of string. It just spans multiple lines. It begins with this @ and quote mark and ends in the same way, but you can't have anything written after here or it doesn't work. And you can't have anything before this, not even white space, or it doesn't work. So I could actually set this to a variable. And you see it's retained the line spacing in there. Okay, so far that we've been setting my variable to a string. We could set it to numbers, but you see when you are sticking the variable into a string, it doesn't automatically add them up or anything, but there is a way to do it by wrapping it in one of these $sign bracket things. That means I've got an expression in here, and I want you to evaluate the whole thing first. So we've got this my variable now. We might have other variables. If we wanted to see what variables we had, we could just type get variable, and it lists everything out for us. So the cool thing about PowerShell is pretty much anything you do has some kind of command to inspect it. This is actually a block of code, but nothing happens when you run it unless you put a dot in front of it or an ampersand sign. And the ampersand signs are a pretty universal way of saying you want to execute something. You could start Notepad, for example, just by typing it, and PowerShell will usually work out, oh, he wants to run Notepad. But the good thing to do is to prefix it with an ampersand so that people who are reading down quickly can see, oh, this is what is going to happen. But they're not exactly the same. The dot means execute this as if I kind of typed it into the section that I'm in now. Kind of like if you typed it into a query window for SQL. Whereas the and sign creates like a mini environment. It's like creating a mini procedure. So you set a variable inside it. It's not available outside of it. It'll just disappear. So I had my variable. This might not be very clear. I'll set my variable to 1. I'll add it to 1 inside the block. But now that I'm outside of the block, it's still 1. But if I had used a dot, we would see that it's 2. Is that clear as mud for you? You probably won't be using this particular thing very often. There's other ways to create these dynamic blocks. The cool thing about what I just did there is the script block create takes a string. It's almost like dynamic SQL. So I grabbed the string and I created a block from it, and then that's the contents of it. It looks like a string, but it's actually a block, and I can run the contents of the block with that ampersand symbol. So it knows my variable is a piece of script, and it's got 1 plus 1, and I've executed it, and it's come out with 2. It's super dynamic. Now, so we've used some strings so far and some numbers, but all of these things that we touch inside PowerShell are .NET objects. So we can do a whole lot of .NET things with them. For example, if I was to grab a 1, I could actually just do 1 like that. I can execute a function on it with dot, and it'll dump out the details of what kind of net object it is. I can convert an integer to a string and then get the type of that and see, oh, it really is a .NET string. And that's like the super basic types. This is an array. An array is like multiple items inside one section. I could do, if I wrap this around in parentheses, I could just pick the first item of the array, or the second item. You can see it's got a type of array. It's got all these array properties like count and things like that. Done that. This is a way to explicitly create an array by putting a little @ before it. See, if I just had what about as a string, it's a string. But say I wanted what about in an array so I could add something to it later, that's when the @ and parentheses come into play. I don't know if you know what hash tables are, but it's very similar. You could visualize it as a kind of mini table where you've only got two things. You've got a key value for something, which is these names, and you've got one value for each. So what I'll do is I'll stick that into a variable, and you can see the variable, it's part of the variable now, and I could say bring me back the result for the key that I'm looking up, line 1, pulls back that value. This I learned about recently too. So I've got a hash table, and I've got a key of path and another key of value, and I've set it to these. And what this is actually doing is saying set content with path as a parameter set to my test file, with value as a parameter set to high. And you can see that that's what it expands to out there dynamically. That's pretty cool. So although I've got this variable with a $, to expand it out just for running commands, you can put a little @ in front of it. That is called splatting. So that's just the contents of my test file so far. This is something special. If you notice a little while up, these were created out of order, because hash tables, they don't really care about the order of things. But this, if you put a little PS custom object in front of it, it'll create an object from the hash table, and instead of having a key value of name that points to line 1, which points to a value, these are actual properties on it. So this is like its own .NET object where you can access each part individually. While I was preparing this, I came across this issue with dates that I never even knew existed. You learn something new every day. You have to be really careful because they look completely fine and normal based on your regional settings, but the second you try to insert one into a string, oops, it switches the format over to US style, and they do this on purpose. So you have to be a bit careful to check when you do stuff and do something special. Here, what we're doing is we're running with that $, and the $, and the parentheses. We're running this expression, which is converting the date to a string first before we stick it into the string and print it out. didn't do measure command. That might be on the next one. Okay, the next big thing, this was all like the data type basics, which is a bit of an alphabet soup and it's a bit boring, but if you don't know what things are, then I'll lose you for the rest of it. But pipes are where things start getting really interesting. So, pipes are like a way of shuffling data around. It's a bit like in integration services when you have a data flow and you have something here and you want to process it with something else, and the pipe is the thing that connects them together. So here I've just got a number 1, and I've passed it to this function called select object, which just, in this case, it'll just grab everything. But it has like it has other special parameters, like say I had 1 and 2. This is an array. I could tell it, oh, I only want the first one. And so it gets its input from whatever you had piped into it and does some processing and then passes it on, and we see the result. Here I have 1 and 2, and I'm passing it to something called measure object, which just counts how many things there are. But you can see there's a whole bunch of extra properties I could use here. I just need to specify the right parameters to tell it what to spend time counting, and it does all the operations on whatever I've stuck into it. I've closed down my session, so I don't have my variable from before. Never mind, continue on. This is another really important part where you pipe something, but you're going to pipe it to a script block where you're going to iterate over each one yourself. And you specify whatever the filler is with a $_ So another way of writing this would be my number in 1, 2, received my number. Same kind of thing. It's grabbing each input that you have and processing it. But there is a slight difference between this. With the first example, it passes 1 into my script block. The script block does something, and then it grabs the next bit, which is 2, and does something with that. But with a for each, if I didn't have 1, 2, if I had a really long-running operation, the for each would wait until it finishes first before it passed everything onto the script block and went through it in one big chunk. So it would take a lot longer. So that's kind of the difference between PowerShell and its pipelines than some other programming language, because they wouldn't do that so easily. So yeah, it's just more parameters for select object. There's another really important function called where object, where you pass in a script block and you say, oh, wherever the contents have some kind of characteristic. So PowerShell doesn't have, when you want to compare something, you don't have equals, equals, or greater than as symbols. You have these little operators, -eq, greater than, less than, and a whole bunch of other ones. Pretty much everything you can imagine contains things like that. Okay, now we're going to look at some of the standard variables that are set up in PowerShell from the time you open it. Important one is PS version table, which is just your way of finding what version of PowerShell am I running. There's env, which is I'm not sure why that didn't work. Well, there's an env drive anyway, which has all of the environment variables that are set on the computer, and you can reference them like this, env winder. But the cool thing is, Metro, when you can treat this are your environment variables, and lots of other things in PowerShell as drives with files in them. So here I've changed to a drive called env, and PowerShell creates this drive, or fakes it. And I did a get child item, which is our fancy way of saying dir, and it's brought back all of these things. And I can use set item and get item to grab these environment variables. I'm treating them like a file system. And this will become a little important later, because we deal with SQL objects in the same way if we want to. Yeah, I've already gone over a little bit about running stuff. It'll work out things like ping and notepad and stuff. We'll give it a path. This is using that environment variable, my computer name, as part of the ping when it runs it, and using a string and executing whatever command is inside the string along with the environment variable. But how about some error handling? Because we could make a mistake like piggin and get an error back. So what we have in PowerShell are these try and catch blocks. It's really simple. Just try, curly bracket, catch. And if we get any kind of terminating error with whatever we're doing, it'll jump into the catch block. This is a lot like C#. So instead of getting the error, we're able to handle it and do whatever we want. But it doesn't always work great. So what if I try to copy something to the root folder and I don't have permissions for it? And now I'm like, oh, I'll be smart and catch that in a try-catch block, but that doesn't work either. The reason why is that it only catches an error that's going to kill things, basically. It's a special class of error that will terminate whatever we're doing, and some errors that we could generate, like copy item, won't stop things. The script will just continue rolling on. So we can set this variable, error action preference. We can say if any kind of error happens, it's a terminating error. And then after we've set that, anything that we run from now on will be caught in the catch block. And we can also specify as a parameter. Say you didn't want to set it for your whole session or whatever you're doing. Oh, yeah, I mean, you could. I could set error action preference to silently continue, and then use copy item in a try catch block, and it would catch it. Okay, well, it'll get a little more exciting soon. There's a lot more that we can do with I/O. I'm using it to scrape web pages and export HTML, but we're going to start with some super basics here, just dealing with some files, CSV files, XML files, that kind of thing. Okay, so how do we get some input? Say we want to prompt the user for something. Read host. Oops. If we want to write something out, there's a whole bunch of different ways we can do it. We could just put a variable name or a string or whatever, and it would usually write it out to us. But there are some situations where you're piping things between functions, and you want some of it to continue on in the pipe and some of it to present to the user for some reason. And so we have different kinds of outputs. Write host will print it directly to the screen no matter what you're doing. Write output will put it into the pipeline. So it's a lot like if you were in a SQL procedure and you were doing a print or a select. Write host is like print, write output is like select. I wrote this bit late at night. I'm not sure what that was about. Anyway, you can also stick things into the clipboard by just piping to clip. Clip is like a Windows command. So I've got my input variable, and you pipe it to clip. It appears in the clipboard like magic. Okay, now we're going to deal with CSV files. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing like a directory listing, and I'm sticking it into a my files variable, and I'll just check it, see how many files I've got in my Windows directory. It says I've got 93. And now I'm going to pipe it to this thing called convert CSV. Now if I take off this last little bit here, we can see it converts those objects into a CSV format that we could open into Excel or something else. But then I'll pipe it from there into set content, which will write it to an actual file. And then I could type. And there it is. It's all CSVified. And you could, this was like, it's a pretty simple example because it's just a directory listing, but you can quickly compose your own objects with the field names that you want, and then convert that to CSV and set content stuff. And when you combine that with things like the select object to just grab out sections of the object before you pass it to the convert CSV, you can do whatever you want. Here you can see, because it's a get directory, it's got like a whole bunch of stuff in it that we don't want. But say I dumped my variable, I don't have the variable that has our directory listing in it anymore, but I can just get the content out of the file, pipe it into convert from CSV, and I've magically got my object back where I can continue where I left off. This is how you would just get the columns that you want. So select object, which I use, the very first thing I use, but here I say I just want these columns, names and attributes, convert it to CSV, write it out. And there's the results. There's a parameter to get rid of that heading line. But if you were to get a data file from a third-party data provider and you wanted to strip out a couple columns from it that were completely pointless for you or that were causing some kind of error, it is super simple to do a get content convert from CSV and then pipe it to select object, the column names that I want, and then write it back out to CSV, and it's done. You don't have to open SSIS and create a whole bunch of fancy stuff to just strip out those columns out of CSV. XML is a little more complicated because we have this different function that will write the XML directly to a file. So I'm grabbing my directory listing that I've stored in my variable, I'm grabbing just the columns I want, I export it to this function, and here's the XML file it created. I think what I'm doing here is I'm just reading it back. Can't remember what I was doing with that. Okay, next part. Okay, that's that. Okay, we're almost at the point where we can do something useful. If that hasn't been enough, there's a little more. Say we wanted to I was just thinking, what can I think of as a need to write an example to show you how to do something semi-complicated? And I thought, well, what's the longest path you could create in Windows? So we can answer a stupid question like that with a bit of PowerShell. So I'm going to create, I've got in my temp directory, and what I'm going to do is create a subdirectories in that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, over and over and over until it breaks, and then we'll catch it, and then we will tell you, we will work out what the longest path name was. Though, of course, this will fail because it has errors in it. And this is something that you'll encounter all the time when you're writing stuff late at night. There's three errors in this. I marked them out here. The first part is, well, I guess I should go over what it's actually doing first. So it's just looping over and over here with this while true, and I know that it will eventually break. I mean, the make directory command will break and exit it out of it for us. I'm using this function here called join path. So it takes a parent name and then a subdirectory name, and it will just keep adding it over and over and over, and then we catch it. So just to run it again, what happens? Okay, directory name cannot be retrieved because it's not been set. And you might not see this if you haven't done a set item set strict mode latest. It might be kind of silent, which is why you have to always put that at the front of whatever scripts you're going to be working on. So what I'm going to do here is fix up, there's the directory name, okay, and we'll try running it again. And it didn't get very far. Why is that? Oh. You know, I'd engineered this to have 3 errors in it, and then I don't think I've thought it out properly, so I'm just going to move on. Never mind. The errors are okay, but the output is still not what I expected, and I don't want to go through it now. Okay, anyways, we're going to go back to having a variable with a bunch of file details from our Windows directory in it. And what kind of type is this? What kind of object do we have? It's an array. It's an array of files. And we can do all those array things on it, checking how many entries we've got. We can use measure object to count the stuff. We could look at the very first file stored in the array and say, what type of object is that? And it's a directory info type. And you always do this with PowerShell objects. You say, well, directory info doesn't really tell me what I can do with it. And so you pipe it out to this get member. And get member looks at whatever you give it and tells you this is absolutely everything that you can do with it. We can call these refresh, replace, we can open it for reading, we can look at what time it was created, we can do all of these things with it. And when I piped it, it didn't pass the array to get member. It unpacks the array and passed the individual items inside to get member. That's why it could tell us what a file info could do. But say we really wanted to know what we could do with an array, we can use a slightly different syntax and tell it, oh, this is the actual object I want you to deal with. I don't want you to pass it in through the pipeline. And you can inspect the array properties this way. So what I'm doing here is just looking at one of the properties, which is name. And it got me all of these names, but that's not really the full name. So we could do some investigation to try to work out what is the property name that we really want. So you pipe it to get member, you add a couple wildcards onto the end, and you can see there's a full name, and that's probably the one we want. And there I've got all the full names. There's another way to do it though. I can pipe it to select object, just like I did with the CSV, and say I just want this column. And the results are very slightly different, but I do eventually get the full names out of it. And I could also add other properties that I want from it, just like with the CSV. Or I could create my own properties dynamically with this little hash table here. And if I run it, it's saying I want to get this full name property, the extension property, and then create one called just extension and run this little bit of code here, which looks like it gets the extension but without the dot in it. So it's a lot like that SSIS, like an SSIS substring thing on a field. then I can pipe that onto other stuff. So I've got my directory, my variable with all the directory of files in it. I can say I just want these parts of that, including the expression I've created, and now I want to sort it by my new extension property. And it can do that for us with just a sort property and descending. And there it is sorted by that descending file extension. What if we wanted to just grab directories? Because there's directories in here mixed up with the files. Well, the first thing you do whenever you have a question is you type help and whatever you're trying to do. In this case, get child item. I could just as well have typed dir. And you just have a look at the properties that we've got. We've actually got this directory switch, which if we use it, we only get directories. So let's do that. Oh, actually, we're not going to do that first. Oh, well, okay. That I jumped ahead of myself a bit. These were the original parameters to get child item. It takes a path and like a filter. In this case, I'm looking at C drive. I'm saying I just want any files or directories or anything called Windows. And then I'm going to look at the directory properties. So now I know that if any directory object is a directory info object, and I can test for it. This is like the long way of doing it. I can look in the Windows directory and then where object and wherever the inside thing is a directory info object, and I just get the directories. Or I could just get the files we're saying is not. Or instead of using that, I can use a bang exclamation mark. That also means not. And then I had another stupid question, which was the longest path on disk that doesn't have any files in it. And it's a really stupid question, but it's the kind of thing where you have to combine a whole lot of things together to get the answer that you want. So this is how you would do it. So we're going to do a dir of C drive. It's got a parameter recurse to say keep going down the list. We only want directories. And if there are any errors, don't tell us about it, just continue on. And then I'm going to pipe everything that comes out of that, so all the directory names, into sorting them by descending order of the length of the file name. And then I'm going to pipe that into a little script block which will check how many files are inside that directory and count them, and if there's 0, I'll grab the first one. Super convoluted, but just to show that you can like join things together however the hell you want. And we will get a response from this. While we're waiting, oh, there we go. Okay, oh, SQL Server has a stupidly long folder name, and it's got this change data capture, and there's nothing in it. So that was the answer to my question. Finally, something. Now we're going to build on something iteratively for the rest of the presentation. What I want to do is find all of the backup files on my computer, but I only wanted to find it on hard disks. Now, the first step to this is, so what disks do we have on the system? And you can use this get PS drive, but get PS drive doesn't tell you whether something's a hard disk or something else. So if you Google that and say, how do I work out what is a hard disk in PowerShell, you'll find this kind of command, which gives us an object which tells us, oh, device IDC, that's a hard disk. So that is answered. And I'm going to create these two variables here, since date, the date that I'm looking for onwards from that, and an array of file types. These are like what backups could be, and then I start joining it together. This isn't too bad. So I get the list of hard disks. That's the hard disk filter there. And here, I'm going to grab that device ID, which is just C drive, and pipe that on. And then I'm going to just add a backslash in front of it, and then search recursively down for any of those backup file types, and then pipe that onto a block where I'm checking what time it was created and whether it was created recently. So we start that running. If I had to type this in DOS, I guess there are probably there is, for the PowerShell dir command, there's no parameter to say I only want files after this date, so we have to make one ourselves. But you could have any kind of weird scenarios where you need to find files of a specific type, and this PowerShell makes it really easy to bring out, to process it with a script block to do whatever you want. Okay, but how does this help me free up time to look at pictures of cats on the internet? You need more. I mean, these are the basics. I mean, it seems like there's just so much stuff here, but it's really, that's the fundamentals of PowerShell. If you can understand that, then you throw in extra stuff to actually make it worthwhile to learn. So we have remote access, which is running PowerShell scripts on other machines from your machine. It's connecting to SQL Server, using like NetDLLs and plugins and stuff, like Exchange Web Services to send emails, special stuff to export and import HTML, or automate Microsoft Office stuff. I'll just see if I can get rid of, yeah, it's better. And okay, from here on in, it's smooth sailing, pretty much. We'll start with remoting. Now, super easy to turn on. You open up PowerShell as an administrator and you run enable PS remoting, and that creates the firewall rules for you and starts up some services and stuff to listen for incoming PowerShell connections. And then there's an allow unencrypted flag to say we can connect to it over HTTP. If you don't have this set, then it uses HTTPS, which needs all these certificates set up, and it's really irritating and difficult to get working unless you are a certificate guru. I'll show you how to do that. And the other part of it is that PowerShell is a little backwards. It has something called trusted hosts. So if I was to run enable PS remoting on my computer, pretty much anyone who has Windows credentials and is in the right group can connect into me. But I can't actually connect anywhere until I specify a computer name in trusted hosts. And you can put a star in there, and you just set that to star, and then you can connect wherever, assuming that you've got your credentials set up. It's like a for corporate enterprise. They don't want you to have this on your computer and then be able to connect to other people to do whatever you want. So they restrict it and make sure you run as administrator to set this. And then there's two commands that actually do the hard work, which I'll show you. Did this come back? Okay, I don't have any backup files, so didn't find anything there. These scripts will be getting shorter and shorter. So first I'll have to run this as an administrator. You can actually write some PowerShell to check whether it's running as administrator or not. It basically tells you exactly what it's going to do. It's going to start some services, add some firewall exceptions, and start listening. And I've already got that set up. And then some stuff I don't understand. Yes to all. Okay. This is the allow unencrypted thing. Now, this is actually like, it's like a file path. PowerShell has virtualized it so you can treat it like files, and you just pass it this path and you can have a look at whatever the setting is, and then you set item. I'm going to set it to true. I've already done this. I've already allowed unencrypted connections. And same deal here, the trusted host. You can see I've already set it to have a value of star. But if I try to execute something remotely on my own computer, it doesn't work. The dot is like, just like in SQL Server, it's just like localhost. The reason for that is you can't remotely run stuff locally on your machine unless you're logged on as administrator or you're running the shell as administrator. So it's like a little gotcha. Because once you set this up, the first thing you want to do is test it, right? But the test will fail unless you're running as administrator. Now what I'm actually running on my laptop here is the Contoso test lab, which has a domain controller, Exchange server, and a whole bunch of other servers and stuff. So DC1 is my domain controller. It's an entirely separate virtualized machine. And all I do is, that's already been set up with enable PS remoting. And I can just type invoke command, the name of the computer I want to connect to, and whatever script block I want to run. So you can see it ran this, and I've got the results. And I could stick those results into a variable. So just looking at that, you can run any kind of custom software that you write on any machine on your network where you've turned this feature on. And maybe that will let you know that how much potential there is to do whatever you want. So I can also use this special type of variable. This is only in PowerShell 3 onwards, I think. I can set a variable on my computer, and then when I'm running this script block on my domain controller, I can say use this variable. The using tells it, oh, the variable is stored locally. So like I don't even need to pass variables along in these script blocks. It's just like a really easy way of doing something. If I wanted to do it the long way, I can do this, which is saying, oh, here's a script block, and I've got this certain parameter, and run it and pass the parameter in and run that on domain controller. It's a real pain. Or say I want to just run an interactive shell on that machine. So here I am. I'm actually on my domain controller one now. So if I look at the computer name, if I look at the environment variables, actually I'm not on my domain controller. X1 is my Exchange server. So I've connected to that, and I'm on my interactive shell, and I look at the environment variables set up on there, and you can see I'm on X1. So I've got my interactive shell, and I could just delete everything on the server. I could do whatever I want. But this is where it's really cool. So what I'm going to do, that's my virtual network. I have another virtual network which is like an internet network, where this INET1 server, you can see if I try to ping my domain controller now, it'll completely fail because my domain controller is only on my domain network. But I'm on the internet, and I've got this internet server set up, INET1. And I can even, assuming I remember the password, let me just check that's running. No, it was running. I got a ping response. Oh, I think I've mistyped the password. There we go. Okay, I've got my password right now. So I can do my PowerShell stuff over the internet and authenticate with my whatever credentials are on that machine and not care that it's on the domain. So what's cool about that is a lot of this remote control stuff only really works within your domain. And when you have multiple domains that aren't trusted, or other servers, say, that are on a customer site, you want to be able to connect to all of them to do your stuff. And you can. They don't have to have any Active Directory stuff set up. You just need to know the right account to get onto. So I'll just switch back to my private domain. we're going to make a little change to that backup finder that I ran before that was looking for backup files on any local disks. This time I'm going to introduce something new though. I'm going to put the script that I wrote and give it a name, which is get files by extension. And it's got these parameters, just like similar to what I did before, but when I call get files by extension, I'll give it a date and the array of whatever I'm looking for. And it's just going to do exactly the same thing as before. Now, why am I putting it into a function? Well, I'm setting up some variables here to say I'm going to run this on all of my servers, or at least 3 of them. My domain controller, my Exchange server, my application server, which I think's got SQL on it. And I want to search from this date, and it already knows the default backup files I'm looking for are back and BCK, so I don't need to do anything with that. And I'll prepare an array here to just store the results. Now, if you remember, I can't run invoke command on my own computer, and I want to get my results into, I want to include my computer in the list. So I'm going to do that manually, and I'll just run my get files by extension that I just created and select out a couple properties I want, and I'll add one more property onto the end just to make it look neat when I get my results. And it's just saying my computer name is this from the environment. Now, I'm going to run my invoke command with my list of server names here. So it's going to run it on each of those servers. And instead of passing a normal script, I'm going to say run this function. This is like a locally defined function. Just stick the function in there and pass it these parameters that I want. And I'll include text files in my search just because I feel like it. And I really want some results out of it. So this is running it at the same time on all of the servers, and it's going to stick the results into my results array so we can have a look. And when it does that, it'll also add its own, this invoke command will add a PS computer name property on it, so I know which server my results came from. And it doesn't take too long in testing. Thankfully. So let's have a look at my results. I'll just grab everything to start with. I've brought back a whole bunch of various information that I didn't intend to, but you get the idea. I've retrieved all these details about all of these files from all of my servers. I can see some are from my Exchange server, some are from app1. I must have a bug in there where I've pulled back some funny details. Let me just run the proper thing, see if it's better. That's better. Okay. I didn't look into what all those other properties are. But yeah, that's the result of my quick search. Easy. The other thing to notice is with that allow unencrypted, that just means don't use HTTPS, but the contents of the details sent over HTTP are encrypted with Kerberos encryption. So it's not a whole lot to worry about. It's not like a massive security hole. So I just showed you how to do a function, but the more functions that you write, you kind of want to package them together into something that you can share with other people, and those are called modules. Modules are a bit like a DLL or a SQL CLR assembly. It's just like a package for holding stuff. And the modules are super easy to create. So I'll just show you now, because this will be the first thing you do. I mean, you'll go create scripts, and then you want to stick them into a container to hold them. Modules sit in somewhere in here. So this is an environment variable PS module path, and you'll see I've already added, oh, well, PowerShell, when you install it, adds one for your user. So my user one in my documents folder. There's this folder called modules. If I wanted to create it in PowerShell, I could. Here's my modules directory. Now, to create a module, you just create a folder inside that, and that's going to be pretty much the name of your module. So I called mine my module, and you run this command here in PowerShell saying just create a template, and I'll show you what the template looks like. Here's what a module looks like. It's got a whole bunch of stuff in it. None of it matters. You just create the template. Then you create this other file here, which just says, when the module loads, grab all the files in the module directory and run them. So it will load up all the functions so that you can access them. And then I wrote here a little test module. I'll go over some of the details of it later, I think. But I've already imported this module into my session. I'll show you how I did that. It's getting a bit muddled here. I think I've messed up the order. When you start up PowerShell, it's got this profile variable, and this is where it's going to look for some instructions of like common modules that you want to load up when you start, or anything else you want to do. So what I did was I set this to say import my module, and so when I started up PowerShell, it looked in that folder, looked in any subfolders, grabbed that file which pointed to the PSM1, which then tells it to load up all the functions. It sounds a little complicated, but I've just described it in a really odd order. I'll just move on. Oh, the first time that you go to do this, you need to run this command: set execution policy scope current user unrestricted force. The reason for that is when PowerShell in its default configuration doesn't let you create your own modules or run scripts that are saved to disk as a security feature. But unless your domain admins have put a blanket ban on it, and almost none of them have, you can run this and fantastic, you can do whatever you want. Okay, so that's like a whole lot of information, so much information. And we're getting near the end, and we need to put it all together into something that looks impressive. So I've created a totally realistic scenario. Your crazy boss, I mean your really hard-working boss, has learned how to do SQL backups and sends you an email saying, I've put it on a server somewhere, but I don't know where, which is like finding a needle in a haystack, except there's a whole bunch of haystacks, one for every single server and workstation in your organization. Your spider sense is tingling, telling you you're going to get these emails over and over and over until you kill your boss and go to a non-extradition country and go on a holiday. So what are we going to do? Our boss is sending us emails. He's telling us he's put backup files somewhere. He keeps doing it. We don't know where they are. How can we use automation to somehow help us? It's easy, kind of. We'll construct a plan. We can use PowerShell to check our emails. We've already got something that will go search all of our servers for files that we want. We can store the results in SQL, because I have to talk about something to keep it relevant. We can make it pretty with XML, with HTML for the email, and we can send a reply to the boss. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And you definitely won't understand the details of how each of these steps is done. But if you were to Google, how do I do HTML? How do I do Exchange Server in PowerShell? How do I do this? You'll find scripts that have like 90% of the work done for you, and then you just need to join them together however you want. So to start with, HTML, we have a really simple commandlet called convert to HTML. You can pipe anything to it, and it puts out a HTML version, but it's really ugly. So I searched for it. I found this other one called New HTML Table by the Rambling Cookie Monster, and I asked his permission to use it, and he said no worries. So here what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing the contents of the directory, grabbing some properties I want, convert it to HTML, write it to a file, and then open it in Explorer so you can see what it looks like. It looks like garbage. Just so you can see, it's really blah. Instead, I've got a module. I actually made this module quickly for the presentation based off of some of the code that he did, and then I made it a bit prettier. And it's very similar to before. I'm just piping it to a different function, new HTML table, and then I have to do a little more housekeeping. I could have multiple tables in a HTML file, so I'm gonna I have to add a header to it and add an end thing to it, and then write it to a file. And the result I get is something that's kind of pretty, and it has highlighting too. This is all done by his function with some changes. And if you think about that, if you have anything you want to stick to HTML now, you can just quickly create an object for it in PowerShell, pipe it through, and you've got your output. It's really good for reuse. But I could go even further. I added some other stuff to his function where I create my table, and then I say, oh, I want to grab these columns and align them to the right, and then I'm going to pipe it to something else to say, hey, if there's an attributes called property called directory, then do some HTML stuff. And if there's a length that's greater than this, then do some HTML stuff. And then write it all to a file and open it. And now I can pipe any object to it and do special highlighting based on all kinds of stuff. In this case, that's a directory, and these are greater than that value I specified. That's really, it's really easy to reuse stuff. And you won't be able to remember this kind of thing, but you know that just by piping things piece by piece into each other, you can get some really fabulous results. So that's that. How do we do email? Well, you have like a SMTP thing built in. You can do a send mail message, but there's also a .NET library called Exchange Web Services Managed API, and that's really super difficult to use. And so I just Googled it once, and I wrote I copied some code and made some changes to it, and that's what I use for my email now instead. So I've already installed EWS. You just this happened last time. It requires, I think this is the 32-bit version of PowerShell. Yep, okay, there we go. And then I've got a whole bunch of stuff here, and you just it just doesn't matter. I grabbed most of this from a web page, and what I'm doing is just creating it, assuming it works, creating a session to my Exchange server, and oops. I created a function called start simulated backup email. This is like similar to what our boss is going to send us when he's complaining about losing files. Help, I've forgotten how to find my backup files. And this is how you would start watching your inbox looking for stuff coming in. And 99% of this is just the template stuff. And then we get to the important bit saying, hey, we only want to get emails that look like this. and this is what we want to do to it. We want to send a reply, and we send it. All of that is template. You just template, template, template from the internet, and then I just want to process the email, and it'll work. So that's how I would do the email section. And the SQL stuff. Now, for SQL, it's super easy. If you install the SQL Server management objects, which comes with SQL Server basically, most of the installs you do would have it. You could just type invoke SQL command, which is a bit like the SQL CMD command, and you could pipe stuff to it, and it's like making a deal with the devil. It's terrible. It has so many bugs in it, and they keep coming over and over and over and over. The very top one is one I found just while I was doing the demo, and I logged it. It doesn't catch errors. It gives you errors where there are no errors. It drops stuff that you wanted it to do. It's pretty horrific. So if you want to do SQL work and you're kind of serious about error handling, you have to write your own functions to do it. So that's what I did. Close that. I'll just get rid of that email. Because we'll simulate that again later. Email supplement. This is what I used before to send that email. All of that template code, and then a tiny bit of the important code down the bottom, which just says, create me an email. Here's the subject, the body, the recipient, send it. Here's where we get serious. This is Microsoft's thing. To start using it, you import this module. It gives you an error when you import it, so you have to use disable name checking just to hide the error. That's how crap it is. It takes a long time as well. Okay, and it changes your directory sometimes when you import it. And what do we get? We get something that looks like it's another emulated disk. So we've got these things we can treat like directories here. One of them is called SQL. We'll look inside. SQL, a machine name, client 1. There's nothing in it. If I wanted to connect to a server, I just cd to my server name, app1, and I want the default database, default instance, and then I can look at stuff like the logins. Almost every part of SQL Server you can just treat like a file to do a directory listing on. I can look at all the databases. I don't have any databases on there, but if I use force, I can see the databases that are built in the system databases. I could look at the users inside my master database, but it has all these limitations. Most things you can't change. It has agent jobs in there, but the status on the agent jobs doesn't update properly, and it's really a mess. And the killer part of it, unless you have Windows credentials on that other end, like you're on the same domain, forget it. It just will not work because it uses a lot of WMI to communicate with the other servers. So, and unless you live in a perfect world, it's just going to cause you grief. You can look at it if you really want to. And here's that invoke SQL command. Just looking at my syslogins. And I stuck it in a variable, and you can see I got all the login information, and I've got all these cool properties to look at. But if I do like selects of multiple tables, and I do some print statements and stuff, it munches all of the tables together into one big object. So the first object here has different properties to the last object, and it's just like all kind of mashed together. instead of being kind of separate. And you've lost your print statements unless you give it a special command, verbose, but then you can't catch that to do any processing on it, or you can kind of with some special syntax at the end. So I've called it, but it's still completely full of bugs. What I'm doing is on the server, just do a print, and I want to capture that print, and if there's any errors, let me know. And it just generates its own errors. It just completely fails. It's just bugs, bugs, bugs. Here's a different way. What I did is I created a function called connect SQL server, where I can pass in the stuff I want, what server or instance, the command I want to run. I want to return an array with multiple tables in it, so I've got an array called logins, an array called sessions, and I stick it into a result set. Now I've got all this information. I've got a connection to do some later work on. I've got these data sets which will have 2 tables in them. This is like ADO.NET stuff, but you don't need to know a whole lot to use the function once you create it. So here I'm grabbing the logins table, what I've called the logins table. What I did was, here are my things. I've grabbed syslogins, I've grabbed exec sessions, and then I've said the first one called logins, second one called sessions. And I get back some results where I can pipe it through to everything else as if it was just a natural object. And I can say, oh, grab my sessions table and get my client connections from client 1. And I've got these objects, and then I can start doing whatever I want with it, which is completely fine until we start wanting to update things. But I added some extra things into my select SQL command function so that I could do it in simple scenarios. So I've grabbed this table called blah, and there's the definition of it. It's just an ID in a document. And now I am adding a row to the table. I'm setting something into the document thing, and then I can call this special part of the object I got back from my select SQL command thing, which says, hey, update it. And if we check it, we see we added a new identity and document thing, and then I can select it back out from SQL Server, and it shows me the same thing. This is going through each row in the table, deleting it, and then doing the update. So I've just deleted all of my rows, and then I'll just select it again just to make sure they're all gone. So like, it's a little convoluted to do updates and things, but it's not impossible. Once you set up some basic functions or modules to do what you want, and you could still use invoke SQL command if you really wanted to. If you're just inserting simple rows or something, you won't get into any trouble. It just
might be a stupid question, but why would you just use SQL?
say, well,
You already know.
s-
Why would you learn this to do that? I mean, stuff is it.
say I wanted to take a directory listing and then dump that into SQL, or I wanted to grab an XML feed and do some processing on it to grab some column names and then dump that into SQL, or I have 300 SQL servers, I want to grab the logins from all of them. I can just do an invoke SQL command, I could actually do an invoke SQL command, pass out a list of all of the servers, and then run that. The problem is, it would be so much easier if invoke SQL command just worked, and I could just say use that, but you have to know the caveats about the bugs in it, and that there are ways to work around it. So there's community versions called invoke SQL command 2 that you can download and use, which don't have the same bugs, and it works basically the same. But it just so happens that PowerShell is much easier to get data out of SQL than to put it in, and that's just the way it is. So just to show you the kind of, it is a little painful. So there's all kinds of stuff here, but you don't need to build this. You can download a script like this that will do all of the hard work for you. or use Invoke SQL command and put up with the bugs. The other thing I didn't mention was this is like just a script file in my module, but it has all of this cool stuff in the header here. This is used by the help system to generate help for whatever I'm going to do. So if I was to type help connect SQL server, I'll actually put it in a show window. It grabs this detail from my header. It generates the syntax itself. It tells me, it grabs like my descriptions from my help file, but then it fills in all the other information that whoever's using it might need. And then it's got notes down the bottom, and if I have examples, it puts examples down the bottom. And that's like super easy to do. You just create a text template that has these column names in it, or these little prefixes, description, a parameter for each parameter, a dot example, and the help system does the rest. And any changes I make here, next time I start up PowerShell, I can do a help and see everything that's in it. So everyone that's writing scripts on the internet has filled in some of these basic documentation details so you can work out how to use their stuff. So, eyes glazing over. Well, let's actually see this totally realistic scenario in action and really hope that it works. So what I've done is I've actually created a module for this, and there's a function in it called start email helper. And if I show you the start email helper, I've put in all documentation here, and it's quite, I think it's kind of straightforward. It's got all the templating stuff for Excel, easy, don't need to remember it. It's polling for emails, don't need to remember that. This is where it gets important. So it looks for emails from my bossy boss, with backups in the subject. And when I get that, I'm going to run this other command I created, search files on servers, get the results of it. I'm going to use my connect SQL server thing, which I can create a quick object and stick it into the table, which has all the files, backup files that I find, and then update my SQL data just to stay relevant again. And then I'll use my basic HTML stuff I had before, and I'll say, hey, if the creation time's in the last 4 days, then highlight it, and then construct a reply to the boss and send it. And that's like the base of it. But it's built on all of the other bits that we already did. The little section we had on how to search the files on all the servers, and then how to search on each individual server. It all just ties together. So let's give it a try. Totally realistic scenario.
So do you have to leave this running all the time?
Well, in this case, it's polling for emails from him. And when I started it, there was a little command in there to run another command to simulate sending the email. So in my Outlook here, what I'll do is the email from him will appear, just as if he had sent it. There we are. Help, I've forgotten the backups. Meanwhile, my script is processing in the background, and I have it printing out some output to say, hey, I got an email. That was the detail of the email. It's figured out it's a help request, and now it's going to scan my C drive, and then it's going to connect to all the other servers and scan them too. Compile the results, stick it out to HTML, make it pretty, and send a reply. And it won't take too long. And I realize it's really convoluted. What I wanted to get through is that it's built step by step. So you do little things, and they build onto other little things, and you pipe them together, and you create something horrible, but that gets the job done. Another example is, say you have to do some data loads, and a user is always sending you these spreadsheets, and it's the same spreadsheet, same file name, and they have a table that they want you to stick the thing in, and you don't want to go through creating network shares or any other complicated processes to do it. You can write a little script here that will wait for the email from them, grabs the Excel file if it has that name, and then dumps it into SQL or whatever else you want. So you don't have to lift a finger, and then it can send a reply saying done. So here is help request processed. I'll show you the email that it sent back. Hey boss, check this out. See if that backup file you saved is on there, and it just highlighted the I think it was the most recent entry. Kind of cool. You could do more formatting on it and stuff, but that's that. So there's like a whole, I mean, PowerShell has so many other things to look at. When you deal with databases, you can't check for null, you check for this DB null. Passwords are a big issue. It has a secure string, which is like the strings that we looked at, but encrypts them based on your machine and username. So only your machine and logged on as you can decrypt that string, unless a hacker gets hold of it and runs a dictionary attack or something. There's no file transfer functionality in it, but you could use background intelligent transfer services, which they use for Windows updates and stuff. You can program it to do things, but it never works, so you have to use WinSCP or whatever. Jobs are a way of creating, like, say I want to run something 10 times all at the same time. I can just do a start job and pass it a script block, and it starts up 10 PowerShell processes and runs them all at the same time. And when I'm ready, I can pull the results back and process it locally. There's Office integration. That's super, super easy to do. You can automate it to open up the Excel window and dump all of that stuff from SQL straight into it, and then set like the top row to stay where it is, and highlight this column and do all kinds of processing on it. If you had something you wanted to do over and over. For example, I had one issue where I wanted to, users had entered budget details into the database, and I wanted to send them back a really nice looking spreadsheet which had their budget details in it. But then, of course, they would update the budget details, and I'd have to go through a whole long process, regenerating, pulling the data back out, putting it back into Excel, adjusting the columns, making it pretty, and you could just automate it in PowerShell once quite quickly. And of course, resistance, because your coworkers don't want to use it, and your boss asks you what you're doing, spending all of your time scripting, and you have to explain, well, I'm saving time. Just, if you want to get started, just use it to get your work done, and don't tell anyone, and problem solved. Now, there's a whole bunch of reading stuff. I really like this PowerShell cookbook because it's got like, hey, this is my problem, this is the script on how to solve it. There's a PowerShell best practices book, which is amazing. There's month of lunches books, which I didn't really like, but seem really popular. There's a whole bunch of modules. PSA Sync is like a really quick way of creating hundreds or thousands of jobs at once. There's PowerShell community extensions where they share, like invoke SQL command 2 and all these other common Active Directory tasks and stuff. And there were some other web pages of stuff that I found useful. Doing the Excel integration. You can quickly create a list of centrally managed servers in SQL Server using PowerShell. Super easy. It's using that disk structure. You are just creating a file in a certain folder with a name and a value, and a username and password. And you can just, if you had a text file or anything else where you had a list of all your servers, you could quickly create all the credentials to show up in Management Studio down the side really quickly. And then there's all kinds of edge cases of weird stuff in PowerShell, which the gotchas for. But it doesn't have to be, this stuff, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just doing a job. I don't think you should think about it too much. I think you should just try it and play with it and get some benefit out of it, rather than thinking, oh, did I do the right thing? Should I have queried the Exchange server in a more efficient way or something else? Just get some use out of it. And I used a whole bunch of images in the presentation that I just got to give them credit. And now you can go look at cat pictures and stuff like Bob after creating your own scripts. That's it. Questions? Yeah.
If I could answer that question on why bother learning PowerShell, it's a bunch of little single, almost one-line tasks. And by chaining them together, you can do some very, very sophisticated stuff that if you had to write a program to do it all at once, you probably wouldn't start. But it also brings the .NET functionality to things that you don't normally have that much access into. So you can see different aspects of it, you can control different things of it, and once you've got it captured once, you can just reuse it again and again. It's one of those things that, like if you never started using batch processing or batch shell, you know, why should I learn that? And you do a couple of them and all of a sudden you're doing a lot of them because it's effective and it's efficient. But especially it brings together Windows, Office, and SQL Server into a common flow. So it is worth learning how to do. The learning curve is a little bit steep. The best thing to do is just start and pick something simple. And the more you do, the better you get at it.
You can say you want to collect performance data from a whole bunch of SQL servers. There's like the really good ways of doing it, which I don't know, because you have to read books and do lots of study and stuff and work out, oh, this is that management data warehouse, the thing that it has, all this functionality. I don't always have, I don't have time for all of that. Sometimes I just want a solution now. And if I wanted to find out, oh, you know, how much disk space do I have on 300 different servers? I can just do a invoke command, type in a list of server names, and I've got my results there. And then I want to select all the disks which have less than X% free. I just pipe it to where disk space divided by whatever is below X%. And it's just done within minutes. So that's just what I mean. You can get like an paralysis by analysis. What's the best practice way of doing something? And my employer might not like me saying, hey, just hack something together and get it done. But at the end of the day, you answer to yourself and do it. you just create a solution.
We've also extended that. How many times when my boss is asking me, how much space do we have left on this SAN? Or EMC, or, you know, which we want to look at the picture, an overall picture. The SAN admin can't tell me. He knows how much is completely allocated, but he can't see within those lines. So we have to know. And PowerShell has given us that ability. Because you can do my manufacturer, you can get the property of that drive, get the allocated, get the free space, and that's used.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff in there's a tool that Kendall Van Dyke put together that's on Codeflex. That's SQL PowerDoc, and you can use it to do full Windows and SQL analysis of the entire server. So you just run it, it comes back with this lovely formatted spreadsheet with all these properties on your disks and your network and all these stuff that I'm sure that if you knew exactly what things to right click want to go and dive down to properties, you could get to most of that. But it's just one thing.
What's it called? PowerDoc?
SQL PowerDoc.
SQL PowerDoc.
Yeah. One thing it doesn't do is trending. That's why we built our own thing.
That's the one thing that's changed over time.
Yeah, we capture the space every day, and we can tell by a small sample or a large sample, is this drive going to be empty in the next week or the next 2,000 days, you know, things like that. That's what we use it for. And I'm really curious if anybody else has used PowerShell in any.
Yeah, so how many people have used PowerShell?
We use huge amounts of it in our environment, but not for SQL. We use it, I mean, all of our deployments and everything is done, and so like we've got like classrooms and stuff. It's very screen. So the guru for it is in Brisbane, so the rest of us will just go and watch it go. And every now and then we go, well, that thing didn't quite work. And I know enough about code to be able to hack it with things great. But
When I created this environment, these are all the servers that run in it, and Microsoft does a document saying, hey, if you want to have a mini network to test with, you've got a domain controller and Exchange server and your client machine running Windows 8, and it has a lot of PowerShell in it. So you just install the image, you run their PowerShell snippet, and that's configured your name and IP address and all the other, added the Windows features that you need, and set it up. If I had to go through a GUI and click stuff to set these up, I would be pretty lost because I'm not a Windows Server admin or anything. Is that all? Okay. Yeah. I'll send Jenny the details. And best practice is not guaranteed.
And the SQL connection?
Yeah, it's fine.
It's not registered, you won't get an email.
I wouldn't trust it.
That's okay.
I wrote that last night. But I've used, what's funny is the more time I spend in PowerShell, it's just paid off in everything. For example, we have a web front end that infrastructure wrote that displays information about all of our servers, from the the name, CPU, Windows Server version, all of the disks, everything else. But I couldn't get a spreadsheet from them that has that information in it. So with a little PowerShell, you can say, download this web page, and then you write a bit of scripting to pull out the tags that you want and pipe it into a CSV, and now it's in Excel. Some things, there's just no way around it except to get your hands dirty and mess with it. That's all.